Bond, I need you back.
I never left.
The wheels of the Bond franchise machine seem to be almost fully in motion again, don't they? The IO Interactive video game, the new Raymond Benson Felix Leiter spin-off novel, Le Chiffre appearing in the Hitman games. We Bond fans have been feasting better than we have in some time these last few weeks, so it's been easy to forget that, oh yeah, they are actually still in early development for the next film in the series. I say easy to forget, but obviously I'm sat here thinking about it every single waking moment of every single day. Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. So the last time I made a video talking about the director speculation for the next era of Bond, there seemed to be two major names in contention, that of Christopher Nolan and of the, I would say, far more likely Alfonso Cuarón. Well, 2 months is a lifetime in the world of Bond rumours, and it was reported that Cuarón has indeed removed himself from contention, and with Christopher Nolan busy for the foreseeable future on his next film, The Odyssey, it seems increasingly unlikely that either filmmaker will be the one to direct the first Amazon Bond film adventure. By the way, and this is a total aside, should we as a fandom agree on a collective term for the next Bond film? I've just been calling it Bond 26 because that's the numbering convention that Eon Productions set during their tenure, and before they came up with an official title throughout the development and whatnot, they would just go by the number, because obviously the number of the Eon series. But I was on Twitter a little while ago, and there was a discussion going on between a couple of my very favourite Bond accounts, Thunderballs and Trans-Siberian Pipeline, and they were having a discussion about how, well, it doesn't really make much sense to refer to it as Bond 26 because that numbering system was purely for the Eon Bond films, and now we're in a whole new era with Amazon, but I mean, it can't just be Bond 1, can it? So what do we call it? Is it Amazon Bond? Bond A1? Like, what do we call it? Or do we just loop in the Casino Royale spoof and Never Say Never Again into the fold, and the next Bond film is just gonna be Bond 28? Do let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Anyway, on Twitter, Hollywood entertainment journalist Jeff Snyder reported the names of several directors who had either apparently pitched or indeed were pitching to Amazon their own visions for the new era of Bond, and there are some very interesting names on this list, some familiar ones, but also a couple of surprises as far as I'm concerned, the most odd being Jonathan Nolan. And yes, that is brother of Christopher, so I guess, yeah, sure, if you can't get the more famous one, go for the brother, just ask Neil Connery. In terms of filmography, I think Jonathan Nolan is probably best known for co-writing a bunch of Christopher Nolan's films, like the Dark Knight trilogy, like Interstellar, Memento, but in terms of directing, his experience seems to be largely on TV series, Person of Interest, Westworld, and Fallout. He directed episodes 4, and Fallout is released via Amazon Prime, so he's already in the Amazon fold, so to speak. So the fact that his name is in contention does make sense in that regard. Now, I haven't seen Fallout or Person of Interest, but for Westworld, I have some experience with, and I can say that, you know, season 1 of that show was one of my favorite seasons of television of all time. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. Then season 2 I very much enjoyed. Season 3 I did not particularly like at all, and season 4 I never bothered to watch, so take from that what you will. Obviously Nolan didn't direct every single episode, but he was one of the showrunners, he created it along with Lisa Joy, so very much their project. I'd be very surprised if Amazon was seriously considering him for director, because, I mean, I would have thought that given that this is an unprecedented chapter in the history of Bond, that they would want, you know, the safest pair of hands, someone with a fair few feature film successes under their belt to helm this thing. And I'm not meaning to be critical of Jonathan Nolan's work at all, it's just that he doesn't have a bank of films for us to go back to look at and think like, okay, well, he had a big success there, and that one might not have done so well, but it had great ideas in it, and, you know, that kind of thing. Like I say, I feel like Amazon are probably gonna want to play this safe for the most part. They've spent a lot of money acquiring this series, and the first film is kinda crucial. So someone untested, effectively, as a feature film, a cinematic director, I don't think would necessarily fit the brief for them. But hey, maybe they're not even considering him for director. Maybe they are talking to him, you know, potentially coming on as a writer. Reports like this can obviously be conflated and whatnot, so I would have thought it would make more sense, particularly with Jonathan Nolan's experience in, you know, television and everything. If they're starting a new film series, they might want to go to someone like him to kind of be a showrunner type figure. Unless this is really just some, like, backdoor strategy to get Christopher Nolan involved in it in some way. Like, well, if we hire his brother, he wouldn't possibly pass up the chance to co-write or be involved in some way. And I don't love that idea, because then it becomes about, you know, it's not about Jonathan Nolan then, is it? It's about Christopher Nolan. And even if Christopher Nolan weren't directing, all of the questions and whatnot are going to be about, so Jonathan, what does your brother think about this? And it's like, I don't feel like the director of this especially crucial moment in Bond history should be overshadowed by what their brother might do with it. Next up, I want to talk about Paul King, who has had a fair few feature film successes under his belt, with Paddington, Paddington 2, Wonka, all produced by David Heyman, who is of course one of the new producers on Bond, so this consideration absolutely makes sense from that perspective. He's also worked on a bunch of TV series, mainly comedies, The Mighty Boosh, Come Fly With Me, Space Force, to name a few. What you're not hearing me cite is anything that could be described as being, you know, action, thriller, or anything like that. These are family-friendly films, and yeah, sure, there are action sequences in Paddington and what have you, but everything is kind of in this family film comedy space, so it is very difficult for me to imagine what a Paul King directed Bond film would look like. And in its own way, that kind of thing is kind of exciting, and yeah, his Paddington films are big successes. I feel like they are considered modern family film classics. It's a beloved British property, so great, he's done brilliant work keeping something that is from, you know, a previous generation alive and relevant. He has a long history working with producer David Heyman, so sure, yeah, if you pair him up with the right writers and the right second unit directors, then maybe this is a match that could be very successful. The other three names that were mentioned in this particular report are all names that have been circulating in the space for some time now, starting with my favorite option of these names, Edgar Wright. He's a genre chameleon. I've seen so many of his films, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Last Night in Soho, really love them all. And he's a big Bond fan too. Funnily enough, I did see him in attendance, actually, when the BFI were having their day screening a bunch of Bond films. He was there for the On Her Majesty's Secret Service, it must have been the 50th, because it was 2019, and he was there in the crowd. I saw him with my own two eyes. He's probably my favorite one of the names that are in contention right now, because of all of them, I feel like, and maybe Paul King actually could fit this bill as well, but I feel like Edgar Wright would give us a really fun, like, people are kind of nervous about the next era of Bond retaining some of that Craig era feel, which is, I think, probably what we would get with a Christopher Nolan directed Bond film. As wonderful as it may well be, it would still probably be on the more serious end of Bond tonally. Edgar Wright has talked about, he has this dark chocolate, milk chocolate theory that I believe I've talked about on the channel before, the idea that Bond goes through dark chocolate and it goes through milk chocolate. So you have Connery, who's the dark chocolate, Moore, who's the milk chocolate, then you have Dalton, the dark chocolate, then you have Brosnan, the milk chocolate, Craig's back to the dark chocolate. So we're due a milk chocolate, which is probably more my speed when it comes to Bond, tonally speaking. And obviously, the director of this first film in the Amazon series is presumably they're going to keep going with the same actor for a select amount of films. There's no reason to believe that they would break with that tradition, so this first film is very crucial in setting the tone for the entire era. They could, of course, do some course correction somewhere, you know, down the line, and we've seen that in the series anyway. You know, Connery started out a bit darker, but by the time you get to You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, it's a bit on the milk chocolate end. Roger Moore, you know, Moonraker is certainly milk chocolate. For Your Eyes Only is probably about as dark chocolate as the Moore era ever got, so you can shift in the middle of eras, of course, but still, the first film is very important in setting the tone for that Bond. And of all these directors, I do feel like Edgar Wright would probably be more in line with the tone that I would personally want moving forward. But that being said, there are still some other very interesting names in contention. Denis Villeneuve's name was in here too, and I think he's a very popular choice among a lot of film fans. And sure enough, I mean, he does have a lot of great movies under his belt, but I thought that he was pretty tied up in the Dune films for the foreseeable future. Deadline reported that Villeneuve is starting to shoot his third film in that series this very summer 2025, and given the production schedule for these kinds of films, I wouldn't imagine that he'd be available to seriously start on Bond for some time, so I don't know if that's all that feasible. So with that in mind, I would have thought that he would have to have a pretty amazing pitch in mind if Amazon were willing to hold fire, essentially, for more than a year to let him finish his Dune trilogy or series or whatever it is. I've never actually seen the Dune film, so I don't really know what the deal is there. And the final name on the report was Edward Berger, director of Conclave, All Quiet on the Western Front, and his name was going around back when we all assumed Eon would continue helming the film series. But then Berger seemed to take him out of contention completely. In an interview with Deadline in September 2024, he's quoted as saying, "That's an absolute rumour, there's no truth to it whatsoever, I would be very grateful if you put out that fire." Obviously though, that was back when Eon Productions, Barbara Broccoli, Michael G. Wilson were in charge, so there's every possibility that he might have had conversations with Amazon since then. Or maybe these are just more fires that Berger would like to put out. I feel like all someone needs to do is just ask him to get to the bottom of it. He was very open in that Deadline article, and that's when he was promoting a movie as well. I think that was just before Conclave came out, or either had just come out. So normally actors, directors, people, when there's Bond rumors going around, they can't wait to sort of lean into it and be like, oh well, maybe I am in contention, whereas he was like, no, I'm not actually, it's quite annoying, could you stop spreading those rumors? I imagine there being a PR person in the corner of the room then just being like, actually, it could work really well in our favor if you sort of play into this and say like, oh well, maybe I am, maybe I aren't, who's to say? So there we go, that's my take on these latest director speculation reports. As always, do let me know in the comments section below what you think, as well as what you think about the naming convention we fans should adhere to for the next Bond film, if Bond 26 is not going to be, if it's not going to make much sense moving forward. Also below, there's links to my various social medias, as well as the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button, so do hit those to stay up to date on future video uploads, and with all that being said, and until next time Bond fans, so long for now.